Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our chemical overview of how to become a value-added supplier while reducing your costs. My name is Linda Mitchell. I'm a global solution architect here at Infor, and I've had the privilege of working with chemical companies for the past 14 years. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about three different topics. One is what's going on in the chemical industry today and how we got there. Infor solution that chemical companies are leveraging to enhance and propel their business goals, as well as talk to you about several examples of companies who are successfully using our solution. So we're going to start off and talk about chemical industry as a whole. And one of the things that people ask me about is, why is Infor interested in chemical companies? So the answer to that is Infor's been working with chemical companies for several decades now. We have chosen in our business direction to focus on 12 specific industries out in the market today, and chemicals is one of those 12. Our mission or goal in providing software is to specialize by industry. So our applications that we provide to the industries is specific for chemical functionality. And as we talk a little bit further, that will be highlighted, that there's certain capabilities that chemical companies need within their enterprise software that Infor brings to the table. And we do that and focus on that because we design all of our software for engineering it for speed. And what that means is enabling companies, in this case specifically chemical companies, to keep up with what's going on in the marketplace. And as you know, business is happening faster and faster every day. So keeping up with it from their growth perspective as a corporation, but also from their implementations and adopting capabilities and functionality that are specific to where the industry is going. So before we get into the specifics of what a chemical company is challenged with, I want to take a moment to define what that really is. And from an Infor perspective, a chemical manufacturer is anybody who makes product through a chemical blend, and that could be paints and pigments, oils and plastics. So I did a bit of research prior to this webcast and did some searching and saying, well, what is the true definition of a chemical company? And it all depends on who you ask. Everybody has their own definitions, but when you net it out, the base definition of all of the ones that are out there on the market is manufacturers who blend chemicals to make their products. And when we look at the industry, there tends to be two types of chemical manufacturers. One is a specialty chemical, and the other is a bulk. So when we talk about specialty chemicals, it's blending chemical products specifically for a customer need or target. For example, I worked with a oil and lubrication company, and their whole goal was to provide specialty blend oils and lubricants for their customers. And one of their customers had a truck fleet that were built in the 1950s, and they couldn't use the oils in their automobiles that was available in the market today. So they hired this company to blend the special oils for their trucks. So they definitely fall under specialty chemicals. Usually you can sell it at a higher price, a bigger margin point, because you're doing that specific blend. To give you an example of a bulk chemical company, I worked with another chemical company that took sand and processed it through 26 distinct chemical processes to make a metal ingot at the end of the day. And then that metal ingot was the raw material for pipings and fittings or medical parts and golf clubs. So they were at the front end of that supply chain, and they didn't specifically blend to make a specific ingot. They blended to get the metal, and the metal was used further down for the specialty parts. So that kind of gives you an idea of the type of companies that would be looking to Infor for support in their enterprise software. Now, when we look specifically at the industry, it's really kind of an exciting time for chemical companies because there's a lot going on. And with a lot going on, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's some challenges that they're facing. And one of the key ones, paramount, is the globalization of their supply chain. So moving their production closer to where the raw materials are, as well as closer to where their customers are. Because as you know, moving chemicals across borders, across nationals, across oceans is quite costly. So they want to try and have their production within or within close by where they're getting raw materials and the customer. So it's shifting. Where the raw materials are being found is shifting from North America to Latin America to Asia, but then now back to North America. So they just found some raw materials that can be used. But the customer base is in the Asia market space. So, leveraging that and figuring out how best to service all of that. The other thing that's going on is there's increased competition in the specialty market because chemical companies are realizing that the biggest margins are in those specialty blends. They all want to try and get into it. So you have the really big companies that were specifically bulk manufacturers are tapping into the specialty market. So there's larger competition, more pressure to be more customer-focused, which leads us into the other challenges is how do they become more customer-focused? How do they make sure that they're being customer-centric as opposed to just putting out a commodity product, being able to put out a value-add product? For example, I had one customer, they're in a coatings business, and they wanted to be value-add to their customers, so they created a blend that allowed their customers to have a 7-layer coating product as opposed to a 9-layer coating product. And so you think, well, that's just 2 layers. At least I did when they first told me about it. But when I thought about the impact of that innovation that they brought to their customers, they saved their customers time in their process. They saved them on materials that they had to buy. And they also enabled them to, by saving the time and the materials, is to maintain their costs, but also being more customer-focused on their end, so increasing that supply chain. So things like that they're trying, chemical companies are trying to get their arms around of how they can do that more. But, of course, then they have on the flip side of that happening is regulations from a regional, from a governmental, a local, and even a customer-specific regulations are increasing on a daily basis. And taking all that into account, because they are still looked at a lot by being a commodities-based, is how do they maintain their margins and stay in business. So what you see in the marketplace is trends that are happening in reaction to those challenges that they're undertaking. So they are trying to manage that global supply chain, as I mentioned, all the way from the supply to the customer. From a competition perspective, it's very expensive to try and build up an R&D department to be able to generate innovative ideas. So a lot of what's going on is companies are buying other companies for intellectual property. They're also buying and merging or doing joint ventures with companies that have manufacturing plants in the ideal area where they want to be. Because as you know, trying to start up and build a brand new chemical manufacturing plant is not typically happening these days. So there's a lot of movement in the marketplace of those mergers and acquisitions to kind of combat some of these challenges that they're up against. The other thing that they're doing from a customer-facing and value-add is the centralizing their R&D so they can reuse things, but also collaborate with their customers in that design process. So taking back to my example with the coatings layer is being able to collaborate with that customer along the way, saying, hey, this is what we think we're doing. Is that a good idea? And back and forth and giving that kind of information. The only way that they can start to do that kind of collaboration is to centralize their R&D so they have visibility to it. The other things that they're working on is bringing that compliance all the way back into the design process. Traditionally, compliance was handled at the production level. So chemists were allowed to be very creative and go about and make these really amazing products, and then marketing was in charge of figuring out where they could sell them. Well, that's somewhat shifting now that being customer-focused and market-focused is bringing those ideas back into the development so regulatory can say, okay, we want to tap into, say, the Asian market. Well, here are the rules and regulations to be able to provide chemicals in Asia. We need to design to these specs. So taking regulations into the design notes. And these are just a couple of the examples from design and from their supply chain of looking into untapped areas for cost control. A lot of times chemical companies are always looking to do cost controls out the shop floor, automate the shop floor. Well, today if you look at most chemical plants, the shop floor is pretty darn automated, and there's not a whole lot more of cost you can take out of that process. So they have to take and look into other creative areas, not only from a innovation cycle or from a planning cycle or supply chain, they're also looking from an IT perspective of how can they manage costs and control those a little bit better. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on how Infor is helping in all of these particular areas. But before we get there, I do want to point out that the view of the world that I'm sharing with you is actually out there in all the marketplaces. So no matter what avenue you go to from the media, you'll see that the global supply chain management, everyone's talking that it's a key ingredient for chemical companies' success. If they don't do it well, then they're not going to be in business much longer. In fact, I have a customer of mine who believes that their ability to take their strategic supply chain, model it, and then apply it to their tactical processes is a game changer for them. It's a differentiator for them in the market, and it's what compels them to grow their business. So it's really relevant. Moving over, you can see mergers and acquisitions. There's an entire tab dedicated on Chemical Week for all mergers and acquisitions that's happening in the marketplace today. When we talk about innovation, $56 billion per year in the U.S. alone is spent around innovation in the chemical space. So it's a serious topic. It's something where money is going to be spent, and because the value at the other end of the line is seen and is relevant. And the last topic about regulatory. So what I always keep an eye on this as I continually do searches on the web. So this search shows I did for chemical regulation posts in the last month, which came up as over 9,000 hits. Now you go, okay, well 9,000, that's not that big of a number. But when you do the math, that's 300 posts a day. And that's just on chemical regulation compliances. That's huge. That the relevance is there, the visibility is there, but the impact to a chemical company's business, if you don't have the regulatory and compliance, the cost and the violations are through the roof. So these are pretty serious topics that chemical companies are trying to manage, and as providers to that industry, and it being one of our key industries, we have to be aware and alert and map our solutions to these particular needs. So when we're doing that mapping, we have to take a look at what chemical companies are asking of us. And the things that they want are tools to help them manage that supply chain. They want to be able to not only manage it from a strategic perspective, but take it down to a tactical level, and then roll that tactical level onto their shop floor. So being able to optimize their schedules. And all of that has to be how they manufacture, how a chemical company manufactures, and things that they consider. They're also asking for tools to help them with that collaboration, give them that visibility to the collaboration, tools to help them automate that regulatory process and get the regulatory people involved in the design part of the business and being able to take that away from being manual to streamlining that business process. And they're also looking to software companies for creative ideas and innovative ideas of how they can save money from a technical perspective. So when we take that into account and apply it to Infor specialized by industry for chemical companies, there's a few key areas of our solution that I'm going to highlight for you. So one of them is about the global supply chain and how chemical companies can model that within the Infor solution. So a lot of times when people talk about the supply chain from a very high level, it looks very easy. You buy things, they get transformed in chemicals, and then they get sold to customers. But, you know, anybody who's in the industry, as most of you probably are, or have worked with the chemical companies, you know it's much more complex. For example, just on the buy side, so if you look over at the supplier side, you're buying based on contracts that you probably have over years of time because you've hedged the market and have those in place. So you have to be able to draw off of those contracts and keep analytics and statistics on that. So the supply chain modeling has to be able to handle modeling those contracts. It also has to be able to model transporting from your supplier to your plant, and it could be in multiple different modes. It could have multiple different stops along the way. You could start from a tanker that goes onto a rail car. The rail car goes into your yard, and then from the yard it gets put into a tank. Being able to model that and understand the cost impact of each of those modes and processes, but also then carrying it through to the storage at your locations. And once again, it could be staying in rail cars in your yard, or it could be putting it into tanks, and the limitations and the capacity that you have in the tanks and what else is in those tanks. You can't just, if the tank is half full, you can't put another product in to cover up the other half. You have to understand, or your system, your supply chain modeling system has to understand that that tank is occupied regardless if it has half full, quarter full, is full to the top. And then when you come over, keep moving to the right, when we talk about in the plant and the transformation of products, transforming chemicals, first off, is pretty complex because of the reactionary process that goes on. But the other thing is dealing with byproducts and co-products in the transformation process and being able to look at nonlinear production processes, being able to model that. And then coming out on the other side, dealing with the storage. And typically the storage or the tank farm that you have is the same storage you're using for the raw material. So how can you manipulate and move around your product to be able to produce as much as possible that's going to satisfy your customers without having it sit in vessels within inside the plant and getting it out through the rest of the supply chain. And then continuing it all the way across the board, the same issues or same challenges from a transportation perspective out to your customers. Multiple modes, multiple stops, multiple ways, and then sometimes in a chemical environment, you actually have to control or manage your customers' storage. So if they have a tank farm, you have to be aware of what's going on in their business and so you don't overload them. So all of these things are going on within the supply chain and how moving product across it, but at every single part along the way, chemical companies need their modeling tool to also deal with shelf life, maturation, potency, and constraint and consistency of products every single point along the way. Specifically, now, if you talk about from a concentration perspective, you want to be able to push in your plan, meaning if you have a raw material that's at a certain constraint, and if it sits in the tank for 2 more days, its consistency or its constraint is going to degrade. So you want to transform it and move it down the line into the next process so you don't have to use more product, so you're saving from a waste. You need the ability to model that in your operations tool or your planning tool to push that product through. But when you're pushing it, you want to do it at a profit level. So you want to look at what you're making and what products are you going to make the most profit on as you push it through the process. So balancing the push-pull process, because, you know, the rule applies to chemical companies just like everybody else, where 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers. You want to be able to identify what you want to make. And then also from a profit perspective, if you have a scarce resource, you want to be cognizant of what demand you're going to fulfill with that scarce resource. What profit are you going to get that is most valuable to you with that scarce resource? So when chemical companies come to us and ask us to help them model their supply chain, these are the problems and the challenges that the modeling tool must support, and these are the challenges and the problems that Infor's modeling tool does support. And it takes it from a strategic level all the way down to the tactical level. Now, I want to put some numbers against this because this is pretty powerful stuff that we're talking about here. We have a customer that is using our solution to help them with their global supply chain. And within the first year of using the system, they were able to take out 1 month's worth of inventory out of their supply chain. So once again, you know, I'm a numbers person. Applying that to the actual dollar impact, that was $125 million they were able to get back in their supply chain by taking that inventory out. They were also able to realign a third of their planning staff to other tasks. And the other component piece that's really important to note here is they were able to increase their order fulfillment rate by 10%, bringing them up to a 94% fulfill rate. So when you look at the global supply chain and you go, really, what does this impact for customer value and lowering our costs? It's right there with this particular example. It's getting inventory out of the system, reduces their costs, getting visibility to the supply chain, enabled them to be more reactive to their customers, and so being more value to their customers and at the order fulfillment rate. Taking that to the next level, chemical companies not only want to plan their process, they want to execute based on how their business runs. And one of the things that I have heard customers struggle with a lot is the scheduling. When they get down to the scheduling, they really can't model the way that they manufacture in most scheduling tools. Well, that's not the case in Infor's scheduling tool. When you look at Infor's solution at a scheduling perspective, it enables chemical companies to model it no matter how they run their business, whether it's a continuous flow process or a batch process, whether they have the nonlinear routings going on in place or they have a direct flow. It also takes into account the sequencing. So when you think about a paint company, it's much less costly for them to go from white paint to black paint than from black paint to white paint. So they want to have their schedule lay out for the shift to go from light to dark. But the other thing that they want to be able to do is if they have to go from dark to light, what are the variable changeovers? So giving you going with that example, it's less costly from white to black, but the variable part is if I change it to black to white, it's more costly, but we're giving them the information that they can make the decision of what they want to do. Maybe it's more valuable from a customer perspective to flip it around for one day, but they have the tool to help them make that business decision because they have visibility to it. So a couple of the other things that we talked about from a planning perspective, carrying that down into the scheduling is the byproducts, the push, the pull, the shelf life, and maturity. And then from the tank management, being able to understand, we talked about it from the tank farm, but also from the vessel on the floor. Remember, if you have chemical product in a vessel on the floor, regardless of whether it's full or half full, you can't put more product in there. If you think about most scheduling tools, it says, well, this resource can run for 5 hours. I'm using it for 4 right now, so I'm going to put a different product in there for the next hour. Well, in chemical companies, you need to know what's in the product, its run time, and how quickly you can get it out of there and any kind of changeover of that product. You just can't just keep backing up stuff into a particular vessel. You need great visibility into that. In fact, I had one customer, a paint company in Northern California, who they were a specialty blend, and their whole decision about the solutions that they were going to select was based on being able to do tank management. And Infor Solution is the only solution in the marketplace that allows them to do that. So with the scheduling capabilities, what our customers can do is optimizing those resources, so being able to get better customer focus by utilizing their resources better, so shrinking up their time to process, so being able to adhere to new customer demands where in the market, buyers of chemicals are becoming more and more demanding on the lead times, or in other words, making their lead times shorter and shorter. So the manufacturer has to be able to react to that to keep that customer satisfaction up. And by optimizing their resources, they can do that. Also, by optimizing the resources, they're able to minimize their overall costs and also minimize their waste because they have clear visibility of what products are going through there at what rate, so they can manage that waste process as well. So having an optimal scheduling tool enables them to manage their costs and become more customer focused. Now, the other area I mentioned earlier about being customer focused is the innovation. And when you look at a chemical company and the innovation, there's 3 components to their innovation cycle. And the traditional component from a formulation perspective, they've always done this. Chemical companies have always dealt with the formulations. Most of the time, it's been on paper or in lab notebooks because systems have not been in place to support them. Infor's solution is because it takes into account not only capturing the formulation, but enabling them to do what-if analysis and optimize that formula based on the characteristics we talked about. So being able to optimize it based on the potency or the concentration of a blend, and being able to look at that in a system, in the formulation. So one of the key things that is driving companies to automate formulations is the visibility. So I dealt with a fine chemical manufacturer in North America believe it or not, about 10 years ago, and they were the first company to talk to me about automating their formulation. And what their driving factor was they wanted the visibility because they felt they had a lot of duplicate formulas, which was causing them to have a lot of duplicate raw materials to get to produce their products. And with the automating and centralizing their formulations, they were able to reduce that amount, which reduced their inventory, which increased their or decreased their costs. So that's one component, and the value to the customers about automating that and getting them out of notebooks is the visibility, and then that visibility gives the rationalization of formulations. But expanding on that, another piece of the pie for formulations is that collaboration piece. So being able to collaborate with the sales internally, getting the ideas from the salespeople, because they're the people who are out there talking to customers and coming up with the ideas and being able to push those back to R&D, but having a repository where it can be queried and viewed and analyzed as opposed to a phone call or an email. The benefit of that is capturing all the ideas, so being able to see what the ideas are coming in as, but also not losing any idea. Because what typically happens is you want your idea funnel very full, because some ideas might be premature for what the market can bear, but you want to keep those on tap that you can leverage them in a year or two from now. And having them in a single repository, it allows you to do that. But it also enables marketing to see what sales is doing, R&D to get the feedback, so that internal collaboration. And where chemical companies are expanding now from a customer perspective is that external collaboration. And by automating it and putting it into a system designed for collaboration, they're able to get the information out to the customer and get their feedback back in, but at the same time protect their intellectual property, which is pretty hard to do or pretty hard to track in a manual process. It was easy to do, but it was pretty hard to track all those pieces together. In a formal automated system, it makes it much easier. The other thing that's a benefit that chemical companies are finding out, and this is another paint company I was dealing with that's a global paint company, is they wanted to be able to kill bad ideas early. So instead of enabling R&D to go down and spend 2 years on this really cool thing that they think is really kind of fun, but it's never going to sell, is getting visibility to that of what they're working on and being able to say, no, we're not going to put any more money into this because no customer is interested in buying that. So let's table it for now and see if the market changes over time, and we'll come revisit it. So saving money in that realm as well with the project management side of the house. Now, the last piece of the pie that I alluded to a little bit earlier is from a regulatory perspective, of bringing that into the compliance area. So recently I was working with a building products, a supplier to building products company, and their regulatory department was working extremely hard, and they were extremely efficient, but they're all manual. And they had to look at every single new development idea or formula change idea, and it was overwhelming. Their department was going under. They were looked at as the bottleneck to the business, that you got to put it in early because regulatory is going to take forever. And they were taking forever because they had to look at everything. There was no way to identify, well, this is a minor change and doesn't really need re-regulation. It can just go beyond or past regulatory, and they don't have to look at it. They believe by using an automated system and having that filter of when they need to be engaged and when they don't need to be engaged is going to alleviate 60% of their department's workload. So moving them from being tactical and just making sure that they don't fall out of compliance to becoming spending 60% of their time on strategic initiatives of ways that they can be more proactive and target new industries based on the regulatory requirements in those, new regions based on the regulatory requirements in those regions. So that's huge, freeing up their time to move them from a tactical environment to a more strategic environment, which is going to allude them to being better customer-focused business. So those are a few things that are going on from an Infor perspective and what our customers are working on. So we talked about three of the different ways, but I also want to make sure I introduce you to the full chemical suite from Infor. It's important to note that Infor's chemical solution supports the chemical manufacturer through their entire business process, from pre-buying products all the way to getting it out to the customer and everything in between, from accounting, human capital, asset maintenance, all of those different component pieces that are also very important to a chemical manufacturer are completely supported within Infor's chemical solution. In addition to that, I mentioned earlier about Infor helping our customers from a technology perspective. So one of the things that we have looked at, in addition to being specialized by industry, engineered for speed, is how can we enable users to work as they live? Because we believe by doing that, they will be able to produce and process their work faster and be more customer-focused if they have the time to do so. So one of the things that we are doing is providing a dashboard from a user perspective that no matter where they need the information from, it comes up on their dashboard, and it's behind the scenes that it takes care of it, or the Infor technology takes care of pulling that information together for them. So in this example, you're looking at a sales order for a customer, and that's on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, you see business analytics based on that information, or in other words, in context sensitive business analytics based on the information that they're looking on the left. You also see that they have notifications to them, whether it is work-related from the sales order, whether it is social-related from the product that's being sold, and conversations that have gone on from about that development process. The whole point here is giving employees the information at the fingertips they need and want without having to worry about where it's coming from. That is what's going to enable people to work as they live and change the way work is done within an enterprise. So when we look at these examples, I've given you examples throughout our time together, but I want to leave you with two specific customer examples as well. Companies that are leveraging Infor's chemical solutions to solve their business problems. And the first one I want to talk about is Sayback. They are a plastics chemical manufacturer, and they came to us because they had a desire to centralize their development because they didn't have visibility across their products and their materials, and they realized without that visibility they were not as streamlined and as efficient as they could be, and they wanted to start to be more customer-focused and manage their costs, and they believe that from a development perspective, centralizing that material and product information, they would be able to do that. So with Infor Solution, they gained that visibility, and by gaining the visibility, they were able to consolidate a lot of their redundant formulas. So they're in the same situation as I mentioned earlier from another customer of getting that visibility enabled them to rationalize the different formulas, which enabled them to reduce the amount of raw materials they have. But for Sayback's specific benefit, they were able to also simplify their production and enabling them to increase their throughput, which, as you know, you're already leaping to where it takes them, is being able to be more proactive and reactive to their customer needs, but also decreasing their cost of production because they have a better visibility and better control of it. So from their perspective, the enhancements or benefits that they got from the development part of their business trickled all the way down through their entire supply chain. Now, looking at Yara International, who are an agro product provider, one of the challenges that they came to us with is they didn't have a clear view of their entire supply chain. And as we talked about earlier, the global supply chain is continuously in flux and changing, and they wanted better visibility so they could get better control of it, and they could start to optimize their supply chain based on different variables that are going on within the different products. So they came to us and asked us what we could do for them, and they decided to use the Infor chemical solution. And the outcome of that, they give full credit to the solution that has enabled them to react more quickly and effectively to the market needs. You also can read into that to their customer needs. And based on the way the architecture works within Infor, they are able to consolidate information from 10 separate ERP systems to get that visibility. So coming at it from two angles, from a business process perspective, but also from a technology, they turned to Infor, and Infor had the solution for them because of the way we have architected our offerings to the market. So that's just two concrete examples of companies that are taking those challenges and using them to make differentiations in their business process. Now, I know I shared with you a lot of information in a very short amount of time, so I wanted to also provide you some follow-up touch points. So the information I'm sharing with you here, there's more details about it at our chemicals homepage, so feel free to tap into that. Or if you'd like to talk to somebody about how Infor can help you in your business, in your solutions, feel free to give us a call at the number provided on the screen here. And we'd be happy to talk to you in details of how you can leverage Infor's chemical solution to tackle the challenges that you're up against in your company today. And with that, I'd like to ask Sally, can you open up the line for anybody who might have any questions?
At this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. Your first question comes from the line of Mike. Your line is now open.
Hi, Linda.
Hey, Mike.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
You shared all the components of Infor's chemical solution. Does a company need to implement all of them at once?
No, and that's one of the things, well, in my mind, one of the beautiful things about the Infor offering is we're taking a different approach to the industry. So we have all the components a chemical company needs, but they certainly don't have to absorb them all or absorb them all at once. We don't take that all or nothing approach. We partner with our customers to understand their business challenges and business needs and align specific capabilities and specific parts of the solutions for them that they can turn on. And they can do it in a phase process if they want, or they can select certain components of the solution to leverage. It's really designed to make them better businesses and help them grow than forcing them to use all of our component pieces all at once. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
I actually have one more, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Yeah. As you know, a huge trend is M&A. How does Infor support various ERPs that come along with mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, so we realize that in this industry as well as some of our other industries, and that's where Infor's technology comes into play. What Infor offers the market is a technology that is loosely coupled. So what that means is being able to take multiple applications, or in this case, in your question, multiple ERPs, and link them together for the business process. And we do this with our ION technology. Now, ION stands for Intelligent Open Network. And through the link that I provided of the chemical homepage, we can learn more, or we'd be more than happy to talk to you more about it. But it's through the architecture, because we know that companies have multiple different systems, And by loosely coupling those systems together across business processes, that's exactly what the ION enables them to do. And that's one of the reasons Yara is able to bring in 10 different systems under one house, is because the way Infor's technology is structured.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Again, if you would like to ask a question, that is star 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no further questions at this time. I turn the call back over to the presenters.
Great. Thanks, Sally. So in closing, I want to thank you for joining us today. Once again, if there's any follow-up that you'd like to talk to us in more detail, please feel free to give us a call. And I wish you all a good day.